Great. So, hi, everybody. Welcome to our presentation, our very short 10-minute presentation on taming the beast, migrating to DSpace 7.6. So just a little bit about us. I'm Stephanie Quail. I'm currently the acting director of the Open Scholarship Department at York University Libraries.
I'm Priscilla. You may all know me by now. So I'm a scholarly communications librarian, and York Space is part of my portfolio. Use she, her pronouns. And I don't know if there's anything else to add to that.
Yeah, great.
Thanks.
So here's our agenda for today's session. We're just going to talk a little bit about York Space's context pre-migration, touch on the migration planning process, touch a little bit on some lessons learned, and then some future directions.
So thanks so much. Okay, great. We're on the historical overview. Excellent. So I'm sure many of you know what an institutional repository is. I mean, I think I'm talking to the right crowd here. Um, for folks who don't know what York Space is and what our mandate is, um, our mandate is to preserve the scholarly work created by York University community members. And that just doesn't include simply, traditional kind of scholarly outputs like research papers and things like that. We're also interested in, podcast episodes, photography, and all the things that our university creates since we have such a kind of humanities focus. Um, we use DSpace. That's not the repository software of every single person who may have a repository. Like there's Digital Commons, Samvera. I know there are folks who run different sorts of software here, and that's totally fine. But it kind of lies in the precipice between a content management system and like Archivematica, for example. So um, the goal of DSpace, it's a digital archive software. It focuses on preservation and long-term access, or long-term storage of item metadata and their associated files or bit streams. And it also enables open access and discovery of the item, which is very cool. So it functions as a dual focus. It's gone through many updates before my time. So the version that we were working with was DSpace 6.4. And so for context, we had very limited customizations to the site. So we basically had a branding overlay, and we also had a few customized forms, but it wasn't anything more than that, essentially. And this was actually deliberately done by our developers because our developers, and I'm sure many of you know, they're precious to our libraries and their precious resource. And so they deliberately held back on a lot of the customizations because every time you customize, that adds a layer of complexity into your migration, right? So we didn't do that. In terms of how it's managed, so previously it was managed by our digital initiatives librarians, who is Andrea Kosovic, who is now our interim dean. Then Anna St. Onge, who is a amazing archivist turned digital initiatives librarian. And then it was later passed on to Jenny, our repositories and publications coordinator, and myself, scholarly communications librarian, later on. So Jenny focuses on the day-to-day management. So things like our mediated deposit program, where faculty members might, give us publications to deposit on their behalf. And does other cool things within York Space, whereas I focus more on service coordination and project management. And then we have Tuan, our developer, who provides all the technical support, and we really appreciate his help very much. So there's actually pretty strict division of labor at York. And this was an organizational culture thing that when I arrived, was something that I had to learn, is that, our team focuses on the repository management side of things, but we don't quite focus as much on the technical aspects. That is in Tuan's wheelhouse, and that is in his kind of roadshow. So we're not as involved in that aspect. So they maintain exclusive access to the server, whereas our team has admin access to DSpace. Okay. So why did we decide to migrate? I'm sure this has been a point of anxiety for many of you. I don't think I'm the only one here who was feeling real anxious about this migration. And you would think that a migration, oh, this is standard fare, pretty normal, except when DSpace 7 came out, it caused waves across the repository community because the UI was completely different, right? So before we had DSpace 6.4 XML UI. Now we have Angular UI. And I think every developer I spoke to was like, oh my God, this is so new. And in addition, the backend was organized a little bit differently as well, including stats. So there was a lot of anxiety, and there still is a lot of anxiety as someone who organizes a community of practice or is part of that community of practice team who speaks to other folks who are DSpace users. There's a lot of anxiety amongst DSpace users around 7.0. Um, and so the reason why we migrated was obviously because support for DSpace 6 and under was ending, community support was ending is ending or ended in July 2023. Um, so that means no more bug fixes, no more patches, no more of those excellent things that we love so much from the community. Um, and frankly, we also like the UI. So the new UI, it's really pretty. So we wanted to add that as well. And so that meant, of course, that we needed to upgrade as quickly as possible. And so Stephanie and I were assigned co-leads of the project, and Jenny was supporting with testing and stakeholder communication. And Tawan obviously was the technical lead on the project.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about why we had to migrate, but we also wanted to migrate for a number of other reasons because York Space just supports our institutional priorities in a number of ways. So in 2019, York passed a Senate-approved open access policy. So York Space is our open access institutional repository. And so we need to make sure that, we are updating it, that it's a secure site and everything and working well. And then also York Space supports like the broader discoverability of York research. And that's obviously a main focus of York is making sure our research is discoverable and accessible. And then also it just will help us support other campus initiatives that are coming up, such as helping researchers create persistent digital identifiers like ORCID IDs. So just to touch briefly on the importance of project management for this project, Priscilla and I, like this was kind of my first time doing a DSpace migration. Priscilla had experience with that in the past, but we were both leading it for the first time. So we actually set up some project management, just kind of a framework to guide us through the project. So we made a project proposal, even though it had to be done. It was just to kind of outline what exactly we were going to do and some of the risks and challenges. And then with our actual team of Jenny, Tuan, Priscilla, and myself, we created a charter just to kind of describe like the working relationships, responsibilities, et cetera, when and how we would meet. And then one thing that was really valuable for our project too was we made a work breakdown schedule. So essentially we just made like work packages and then we created all the deliverables underneath that. And then we were able to actually put it into MS Teams Planner. And it was just a nice way to remind everybody on the team of various things they had to be working on. And then finally, we made a communication strategy at the very beginning to figure out how we would work with internal and external stakeholders.
So I'll keep the next part brief because we have very limited time. So when we created these key project phases, we obviously discussed them with our leadership and administration, but there was a lot of consultation with a lot of people, including developers, some librarians who may be in the audience, actually. I spoke to some folks here. And so that kind of led us to kind of these key four project phases. So the first one was learning and creating a clone site. We wanted to leave time for our developer to learn Angular. That was really important to us. But also we wanted to leave time for us to learn the new kind of features that were available on the repository manager side of things because they are very different. And we wanted to make sure they had time to create a clone site. So then I developed a testing script, and we wanted to make sure we were performing tests on the clone site. Then we would migrate the actual site to DSpace 7.6. And then obviously we did testing on the production site once we migrated as well. So, just a quick look at the testing script. You're more than welcome to take a look at the template and use it if you need it. Um, York had very different methods for testing prior to this. I like a systematic approach because I feel like it's easier to communicate with my developer when I'm able to kind of give precise feedback. And this is a way I've typically done this. And so essentially, the testing script initially was based off of the work done by the DSpace Community Advisory Team, so DCAT for folks who don't know. And they've kind of developed a testing script for DSpace 7. Um, but okay, there we go. But it didn't have any of the other features that came out of the other instances from 7.1 to 7.6. So I had to manually add these myself, which was a bit odd, honestly, but it was something I did, and they're available in there if you'd like to take a look and use them. And then just a final couple of points on our challenges and looking forward. So we obviously had a number of issues. Obviously, with most libraries, we all know that lack of time and institutional priorities are always an issue. Um, but I think the other thing is I had never led a migration project, and Stephanie had never been on a migration project, and neither had Jenny. So we had to take a lot of time to learn and grow. Um, and so that was an issue as well. And then also we were Stephanie and I were part of a project where we were actually updating procedures for York Space as well. So it was kind of a perfect storm situation where we were doing kind of policy work and migration work at the same time. So yeah, we've come far. We have some future initiatives that we're interested in kind of doing. We don't have time to talk about them today, but you can come and talk to me about them later. So thank you very much, and we hope you enjoyed our fun medieval manuscript images of monster.